Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we are heading out onto the pitch. But we aren't just, kicking a ball around. We are stripping away the romance of the beautiful game to look at the invisible numbers that actually drive performance.
We were talking about football or soccer training, specifically those high-intensity drills that pretty much every modern coach swears by. Small-sided games.
You know, the drill shrink the pitch, cut the team sizes down, and just tell everyone to go full throttle.
It is the absolute staple of modern training. I mean, from the Champions League academies all the way down to local Sunday leagues, everyone is doing it.
But there is a massive question mark hanging over it that I think most people, even experienced coaches, don't always see.
The consistency problem.
Exactly. If a coach walks into the locker room and writes 4 rounds of 3v3 on the whiteboard, they assume they know exactly what physical workout the players are getting.
They assume it's a controlled prescription, like handing out a specific milligram of the pill.
But human beings are messy, and soccer is chaotic. So today we are digging into a fascinating piece of research that tries to solve this puzzle.
We're looking at a paper titled Determinants of Cardiovascular Load Variability During Small-Sided Games, Influence of Game Format, Bout Intensity, and Yo-Yo Intermittent Recovery Performance.
That's quite a mouthful.
It is, but it covers all the bases. This study comes to us from the Journal of Sports Science and Medicine. It was published in 2026, volume 25, pages 272 through 281.
And the research team.
That would be Aleksandra Kisilewicz, Małgorzata Smoter, and Robert Trybulski.
So a 2026 study, very fresh data. The core problem they're tackling is something I think anyone who's ever managed a team or even done a group workout can, relate to.
For sure. You assign a workout, say, 4 rounds of high-intensity play. You assume that round 1 looks like round 4.
And that player A is getting the same work as player B. But how do you know?
That is the black box of sports science. We call it within-player variability. Ideally, if I prescribe a training stimulus, I want the cardiovascular load, basically how hard your heart is working, to be stable.
Right.
If your heart rate spikes in the first bout because you're fresh, but then drops off in the third because you're pacing yourself, well, the training effect becomes unreliable.
And for years, coaches have just assumed that if they change the format, say playing 3 versus 3 instead of 5 versus 5, that automatically fixes the intensity.
That is the prevailing assumption. They think, oh, 3v3 is harder, so it must be more consistent.
And that is exactly what this study set out to test.
Yep. The mission here was to isolate the variables. They wanted to know what actually drives that stability. Is it the format? Is it how fit the player is? Or is it something else entirely?
Okay, let's unpack the setup first, because I love how rigorous they were with this. This wasn't just grabbing a few guys from a park kickabout.
No, this was a well-controlled study.
Yeah.
They recruited 60 male youth players, under 19s, from 3 different regional clubs in Poland.
And these weren't beginners.
Not at all. They had significant training experience. And a crucial point that shows they knew what they were doing. They explicitly excluded goalkeepers.
Makes sense. Goalies are a different breed physiologically. If you include them in running stats, it just throws everything off.
Exactly. This is about the outfielders. And the design of the experiment was a randomized crossover. This is really the gold standard for this kind of research.
So what does that mean in practice?
It took place over 2 weeks. In week 1, Group A played the 3v3 format, while Group B played 5v5. Then in week 2, they just swapped.
I want to pause on that because that crossover design matters so much. It basically removes the team bias, right?
Precisely. If you just had one group play 3v3 and another play 5v5, you could argue that, one group was just fitter or lazier.
Or more aggressive.
By swapping them, every single player serves as their own control. You can compare player A in a 3v3 environment directly against player A in a 5v5 environment. It isolates the format from the individual.
And they kept the other variables incredibly tight.
Very tight. The drills were 4 bouts of 3 minutes each, with a 2-minute passive recovery in between. That's a standard high-intensity interval structure.
Standard and effective.
Right.
And they didn't just eyeball the pitch size, which is a common mistake.
A huge mistake. They calculated the pitch size to ensure exactly 100 square meters of playing area per player in both formats.
So for the 3v3, the pitch was 30 by 20 meters. For 5v5, it was roughly 39 by 26 meters.
The density was identical. This is vital, because if the 5v5 pitch was relatively larger, you could blame the extra space for a drop in intensity.
Or if it was smaller, you could blame the crowding.
Exactly. By locking the density, they ensured that any difference in the data came from the game dynamic, not the available space.
So you can't blame the crowd. The only thing changing is the number of players and, I guess, the tactical complexity.
Yep. They monitored everyone's heart rate continuously, beat by beat, 1 hertz. And the metric they were hunting for. You mentioned earlier, the CV.
The CV percent, or coefficient of variation?
Right. For the listeners, you can think of this as a chaos meter or maybe a wobble score. It just measures how much the heart rate bounced around between those 4 bouts.
So a low CV percentage, let's say under 2%, means high stability. The line is flat, the load was consistent.
And a high CV means the heart rate was fluctuating unpredictably.
So if I'm a coach, I want a low CV. I want to know that the work I prescribe is the work being delivered round after round.
Generally, yes. The stability implies control.
Okay, so we have our players, we have our formats, but they were also looking at 2 other big variables. One was fitness.
Yes, aerobic fitness. They measure this using the Yo-Yo Intermittent Recovery Test Level 1, or YIR1.
The dreaded yo-yo test. Anyone who played soccer growing up probably has nightmares about the beep.
It is infamous for a reason. It's a variant of the beep test, but it's specifically designed for soccer's stop-start nature.
Run, rest, run faster.
Exactly. It measures intermittent endurance. The average distance these U19 players covered was about 1795 meters, but there was a really wide range.
And the question they were asking with that test was, does being fitter make your heart rate more stable during games?
That was the hypothesis. And the third variable was simply mean heart rate intensity. Basically, how hard were they actually working on average?
Okay, so the setup is clear. We have the format, the fitness, and the intensity. The researchers basically threw all of these into a statistical blender to see what came out on top.
The guess they started with was pretty standard logic. They expected 3v3 to be harder, which it usually is.
And they expected that higher fitness and higher intensity would lead to more stability.
Seemed like a safe bet.
All right, let's get to the good stuff, the results. First off, let's validate the basics. Was 3v3 actually harder?
It was. That part of the hypothesis held up perfectly. The mean heart rate for the 3v3 games was around 181 beats per minute.
And for 5v5?
Significantly lower, around 174 beats per minute.
That is a solid difference. 7 beats per minute over a whole session adds up. That's a different physiological zone for a lot of people.
It is. 181 BPM is pushing into that red zone, usually above 90% of max heart rate for these ages. 174 is still hard, but it's more threshold work.
And what about the variability, the chaos meter?
The 5v5 format was definitely messier. The CV was 2.61% in 5v5, compared to only 1.97% in 3v3.
Okay, so if we stop the deep dive right here, the conclusion would be 3v3 is harder and more stable. Case closed.
You would think so.
Yeah.
And honestly, a lot of studies might have stopped there, but this is where the paper gets really interesting. They ran a linear mixed effects model.
Which sounds like a headache, but essentially they were checking to see which variable was actually driving the bus, right?
Exactly. They wanted to see the causation, not just the correlation.
Right.
They threw everything into the mathematical pot to see what was actually predicting the stability.
Mm-hmm.
And here's the shocker. Game format was not significant.
Wait, really? But you just said 3v3 was more stable. How can the format not be significant?
It was more stable, but not because it was 3v3.
Okay.
It was more stable because it was harder.
Oh, I think I see where this is going.
The regression analysis showed that the only significant predictor of heart rate stability was the mean heart rate intensity.
So it doesn't matter what game you're playing, it just matters how hard the engine is revving.
Exactly. They found a very specific linear relationship. For every single beat per minute that the intensity increased, the variability dropped by approximately 2.7%.
Wow, that is a steep drop. So the harder you work, the more consistent the work becomes.
Precisely. The format is just a container. 3v3 tends to force high intensity, so it tends to be stable. But if you played a lazy 3v3, it would be unstable.
And if you could somehow play a hyper-intense 5v5?
It would be stable. The format itself is irrelevant to stability. The effort is everything.
That completely changes how we view drill selection. But wait, what about fitness? Did the yo-yo test stars perform better?
This was the second shocker. No.
Yeah.
The yo-yo intermittent recovery performance was not a significant predictor of stability either.
So being the fittest guy on the team didn't guarantee that your heart rate would be stable. That seems counterintuitive.
It really does.
Yeah.
You'd think if you have a massive aerobic engine, you should be able to maintain a steady state better than a guy who is gasping for air.
But that's not what the data showed.
Not at all.
Yeah.
The chaos of the game affected the fit guys just as much as the less fit guys.
This flips the script. But before we get to the practical stuff, I need to understand the why. Why does working harder make you more consistent?
It comes down to a concept called physiological saturation, or the ceiling effect.
Okay.
Think about it this way. Imagine you are driving a car in heavy traffic. You are going, say, 30 miles per hour.
Okay. Stop and go. Lots of variation.
Exactly. At 30 miles per hour, you have options. You can speed up, you can slow down, you can coast. Your speed and your engine RPMs are going to vary constantly. That's the low-intensity state.
You have wiggle room.
You got it. Now, imagine you are on the Autobahn with your foot flat to the floor. You're at top speed.
No options left.
You have no options left. You can't speed up because you're maxed out. Your RPMs are pinned at the red line.
There's no room for variation because you're using 100% of what you have.
Precisely. When these players hit 180 or 185 beats per minute in the 3v3 games, their cardiovascular system is saturated. It's recruiting every available system. There is less room for the heart rate to drop or spike because it's pinned against that physiological ceiling.
So in the 5v5 games, hovering around 174 BPM, they were effectively stuck in traffic.
We call that the low-intensity trap. In a 5v5, you have 4 teammates. That's 4 other people who can chase the ball. Physiologically, that lower intensity leaves room for what we call micro-recovery.
Like what?
You pass the ball, and maybe you walk for 4 seconds. Your heart rate drops. Then the ball comes back, you sprint, and it spikes. That gap between the ceiling and your current heart rate is where the variability lives.
It's hiding space. You can hide in a 5v5. You can't hide in a 3v3.
You can't hide in the 3v3 because on a 30 by 20 meter pitch with only 2 teammates, if you stop moving, the other team scores. The engagement is forced.
But, and this is the key takeaway, if you did manage to force the intensity of that 5v5 game up to an 80 BPM.
The variability would disappear there too.
Because you'd hit the ceiling.
Exactly. The format doesn't matter. The ceiling matters.
I'm still stuck on the fitness finding, though. Why didn't the fit guys have an advantage in stability? I mean, surely the guys with the 2,000-meter yo-yo test recover faster during those 2-minute breaks.
They almost certainly do recover faster between the bouts. That is where aerobic fitness shines, recovery rate.
Oh.
But this study looked at the stability during the work. That's a crucial distinction. The researchers suggest that the demands of the game, the external load, are so dominant that they override the internal fitness differences.
So the game acts as a dictator. It tells your heart what to do, and your aerobic capacity is just along for the ride.
In a way, yes. The situational things, pacing, tactical decisions, are stronger drivers of heart rate in that moment than your aerobic capacity.
That is a humbling thought for the fitness fanatics. The game is the boss.
It really highlights the difference between test fitness, running back and forth to a beep, and game fitness. They overlap, but they are not the same thing.
So, bringing this back to the real world, I'm a coach, or maybe I'm an athlete planning my own conditioning. What do I do?
The biggest takeaway is a concept I like to call labeling versus monitoring. You can't rely on the label of the drill. You can't just write 3v3 on the whiteboard and assume the job is done.
Right, because the format isn't the magic pill.
The label, small-sided game, does not guarantee a physiological load. The intensity guarantees the load. So if you want stability, you have to design the session to force that saturation.
Which means minimizing those hiding moments we talked about.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Keep a supply of balls around the perimeter so there's no walking to fetch one. Relentless verbal encouragement, maybe strict man-marking rules. You have to manufacture the intensity.
The study basically says, work harder and the data will clean itself up.
That's the bumper sticker version, yes.
Yeah.
High intensity creates signal clarity. Low intensity creates noise.
But let me play devil's advocate here. Is noise always bad? A real match isn't a steady state 180 BPM grind. It's sprint, walk, jog, sprint. It's chaotic.
And I'm glad you asked that, because the authors address this. Variability isn't the villain, it's just a variable. It depends on your goal.
Okay.
If you are in preseason and you are trying to build raw aerobic power, you want low variability. You want to hammer the heart muscle consistently, like doing reps in the gym.
You want to know you lifted 100 pounds, not maybe 80, maybe 120.
Exactly. In that case, use high-intensity 3v3 to hit that ceiling. But if you're 2 days out from a game, you might want to mimic the specific demands of a match. And matches are chaotic.
They have high variability.
So a lower-intensity 5v5 game might actually be the better drill specifically because it forces the body to regulate through those spikes and drops.
So 5v5 isn't worse, it's just a tool for a different job.
Precisely. It's about intentionality. If you use 5v5 thinking you're getting a stable aerobic workout, you're wrong. But if you use 5v5 because you want that tactical variability, you're right.
This circles back to the idea of live monitoring. We mentioned this in a lot of deep dives, but you really can't manage what you don't measure.
It's vital here. If you are standing on the sideline with an iPad connected to the heart rate monitors, and you see the team dropping into that 1 in 70 BPM zone,
You know your stability is gone. The data is getting messy.
and you can step in, press higher, stop walking. You can drive the intensity back up to the ceiling to save the session. Without that live data, you're just hoping for the best.
It empowers the coach to be an active participant in the physiology, not just a spectator.
It changes coaching from an art into a science. You're reacting to the internal load of the players in real time.
I love that.
Yeah.
So let's summarize. We looked at the work by Kisilewicz, Smoter, and Trybulski from 2026. They took the chaotic environment of 3v3 and 5v5 and found that the secret sauce to a consistent workout isn't the size of the pitch or the fitness of the player.
It's the effort. High mean heart rate intensity is the only significant predictor of a stable cardiovascular load.
The ceiling effect. It's a great visual. If you're bumping your head against the roof, you can't jump up and down.
Exactly. And for anyone who loves data, I highly recommend looking at the full article in the journal Sports Science and Medicine. Specifically, look at figures 2 and 3. You see the variability just plummet as the heart rate climbs. It's beautiful data.
And check out the yo-yo test scatter plot, too. It looks like someone fired a shotgun at a piece of paper. Total randomness.
Which is a result in itself.
Absolutely. Listen, knowing the why behind the sweat makes the training so much more effective. If you enjoyed this deep dive, make sure you are subscribed. Turn on those notifications so you don't miss the next one.
Always more to learn.
Always. Thanks for listening, everyone. Stay curious and see you in the next deep dive.